Chapter 30. The Culture of Rites. Numbers 16, 41 to 50. But on the morrow, all the congregation of the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron, saying, Ye have killed the people of the Lord. And it came to pass, when the congregation was gathered against Moses and against Aaron, that they looked toward the tabernacle of the congregation, and behold, the cloud covered it, and the glory of the Lord appeared. And Moses and Aaron came before the tabernacle of the congregation. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Get you up from among this congregation, that I may consume them as in a moment. And they fell upon their faces. And Moses said unto Aaron, Take a censer, and put fire therein from off the altar, and put on incense, and go quickly unto the congregation, and make an atonement for them, for there is wrath gone out from the Lord, the plague is begun. And Aaron took as Moses commanded, and ran into the midst of the congregation, and behold, the plague was begun among the people. And he put on incense, and made an atonement for the people. And he stood between the dead and the living, and the plague was stayed. Now they that died in the plague were 14,700, beside them that died about the manner of Korah. And Aaron returned unto Moses unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and the plague was stayed. Numbers 16, 41 to 50. The death of Korah and his associates taught Israel nothing. Men in revolt against God refused to be taught. Theirs is not the culture of holiness, but the culture of rites. They felt entitled to make claims on God and complaints against Moses and Aaron. Their doctrine of God was also very defective. First, in all their complaints, they have very little to say about God. Their malice is directed primarily against Moses. Second, then and now many people have had and do have very defective views of God. For them, God exists to ratify man's will, to see to it that man's will is done on earth and also in heaven. If God is good, he will underwrite all of man's demands, they believe. If they are told otherwise, they blame the prophet, priest, or pastor who witnesses to God's sovereign nature and purpose. Israel, therefore, could not believe that God killed Korah and his associates. After all, what was wrong with the demand for democracy and equality? Hence their charge against Aaron and Moses. Ye have killed the people of the Lord. Verse 41. The rebels were for them God's people, insisting on the equal holiness of all men before God. Moses and Aaron were evil men, refusing to acknowledge this fact. Somehow, by means unknown to the people, they had killed 251 important leaders. Martin North used the right word in describing what the people did. This was a revolt. It was directed against Moses and Aaron, but it was essentially an affirmation of rights. Sin and crime should not be punished, for all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. 16:3. In a culture of rights, those who believe in justice and judgment are the evil ones. Men and their rights take priority over good and evil, over all moral considerations. Given this fact, it is not surprising that many intellectuals have held that the Marquis de Sade is the great philosopher-psychologist of the modern era. Well before Max Steiner and Friedrich Nietzsche, he proclaimed the death of God and the extinction of all ideas of good and evil. This is a necessary conclusion to any logical belief in the rights of man. It massacres the good and defends the evil. Calvin saw this episode as indicative of the senselessness and arrogance of hypocrites in the Lord's congregation. Commenting on verse 41, he wrote, "In two ways they betray their senselessness. First, by substituting Moses and Aaron as guilty to the murder in place of God, and secondly, by sanctifying these putrid corpses as if in despite of God. They accuse Moses and Aaron of the slaughter of which God had plainly shown himself to be the author, as they themselves had been compelled to feel. But such is the blindness of the reprobate with respect to God's works, that his glory rather stupefies them than excites their admiration. The foulest ingratitude was also added, for they do not consider that only a very few hours had elapsed since they had been preserved by the intercession of Moses from impending destruction. Thus, in their desire to avenge the death of a few, they call those the killers of the people of the Lord, to whom they ought to have been grateful for the safety of all. Again, what arrogance it is to count among the people of God, as if against his will, those reprobates, when he had not only cut them off from his church, but had also exterminated them from the world and from the human race. But thus do the wicked wax wanton against God under the very cover of his gifts, and especially they do not hesitate to mock him with empty titles and outward signs as the masks of their iniquity. Age after age, the ungodly have raged against the godly because of their hatred for God and his faithful ones. The great 9th century theologian Gotthald Fulgentius, for his faithfulness to the biblical doctrines of predestination and grace, was tried by a church council in Picardy in AD 849 in the presence of the king, Charles the Bald, and imprisoned until his death. October the 30th, 865, 28 years later. God's truth has commonly been unpopular in both church and state. We are in a war, although many churchmen shy away from that fact. But to avoid the war with men is to face war with Almighty God, a war no man can win. This is the great war of the ages. We are told in verse 42 that, when the congregation was gathered against Moses and against Aaron, that they looked toward the tabernacle of the congregation. Ronald B. Allen's comment here is very important. Verse 42 speaks of the men turning toward the tent of meeting. This may merely mean that they looked toward the tent, but it may mean that the crowd was about to take over the territory, to seize the tents as their own holding. Such a seizure would have been a logical conclusion of the belief that all the people were equally holy. It meant a move to end the exclusive priesthood and to affirm the equality of all. The Reformation belief in the priesthood of all believers must not be confused with this false belief. The Reformation doctrine held to the equal access to God by prayer of all men, to the duty of all men to function as his priests, prophets, and kings in their particular calling, and to be the priests in their families. It was not an equalitarian doctrine, but an insistence on the duty of all men to be holy. Notice that the charge against Moses and Aaron is, "Ye have killed the people of the Lord," verse 41. The rebels are exalted into the status of God's chosen ones, and Moses and Aaron are the ungodly ones. In this revolt, the moral order is turned upside down in the popular imagination. The very men responsible for God's judgment on the nation are called his chosen ones. As C.J. Eliot observed, "It is difficult to conceive of a more striking illustration of the depravity of the human heart that is afforded by this outbreak of the same spirit of rebellion which had been so signally punished on the previous day. This is the kind of radical and willful blindness God speaks about to Isaiah, saying, "And he said, Go and tell this people, Hear ye indeed, but understand not, and see ye indeed, but perceive not. Make the hearts of this people fat, and make their ears heavy, and shut their eyes, lest they see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and convert, and be healed." Isaiah 6, 9 and 10. This rebellion was against God, but the immediate targets were Moses and Aaron. Men strike against God's people because they cannot strike directly against God. As one modern rabbinic scholar has pointed out, many rabbis have used this text to exalt their own authority as successors to Moses, rather than seeing it as a revolt against God's law, authority, and judgment. God's wrath was immediately in evidence as a plague struck down thousands. Before it was over, 14,700 were dead, not counting those who had died with Korah earlier. We are told that the plague was stayed by Aaron at Moses' command by making atonement for the people. There are three aspects to this. First, this is the only known use of incense for atonement. Normally, incense did not atone. Here it was incense with fire from the altar of sacrifice, so that it represented atoning sacrifice. Second, Aaron is vindicated as priest, and as the priestly mediator between God and man, a type of the Messiah to come. Aaron's exclusive title to the high priestly office had been challenged. Aaron's appointment by God, not Aaron's person, is now vindicated. Those who survived lived because of Aaron's intercession. The survivors had no more merit than those who died. Only God's mercy kept them alive to die later in the wilderness. Third, reference is made to the fact that there is wrath gone out from the Lord, verse 46. References to the wrath of God are not common in the modern church, but in a culture of holiness, the wrath of God is a serious consideration and a fact. In a culture of human rights, the wrath of God is replaced by the wrath of men. Rioters and demonstrators make a great show of righteous anger in the name of their rights. Similarly, as women's rights and children's rights have been asserted, we have seen similar expressions of outrage and wrath. The culture of rights is a culture of wrath, of violence, and of lawlessness. God's wrath is treated as a shameful matter, whereas man's wrath is seen as righteous anger. Our moral world is turned upside down when the wrath of homosexuals and pro-abortionists is seen as a just defense of their rights. The culture of rights is a culture of autonomy from God and from man, from duty and from responsibility. It is suicidal, and it manifests a love of death. Proverbs 8:35 and 36 declares, "For whoso findeth me findeth life, and shall obtain favour of the Lord. But he that sinneth against me wrongeth his own soul. All they that hate me love death.